next talk show, What Now, where we are bringing people from all around the world and just basically sharing wisdom that is all around us. And yesterday's guests were talking about microeconomies, microfinance, and interest-free loans. So today's guest is going to tell us that she's going to share her Indigenous wisdom with us and how the microeconomies around the world have that wisdom within themselves. But how to now make the transition from micro to macro is our question. Today, we have Maureen Brown. She's joining us
Manitoba,
Canada. So Mark is going to introduce Maureen to us. Welcome to our show, Maureen. Over to you, Mark.
thank you.
Well, thank you. Maureen Brown and I met. I was asked to come to her nation, Opaskwayak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. It's a long drive from the U.S. border or from Winnipeg even. And Chief Christian Sinclair was so taken by the Economics of Wellbeing book. He actually purchased it from me while we were at the Indigineous conference, which Indigineous is something Caroline Hilton has come up with, and she'll be one of our next guests. So the Christian invited me up to the nation on election week, I think. I didn't know at the time. And I met Maureen Brown, who's a counselor on the Chief and Council for Opaskwayak Cree Nation. And this nation really blew me away. First of all, because of the progressive nature of the leadership, which includes Maureen, and the fact that they understood sort of implicitly, almost intuitively, this vision of a well-being economy, going all the way to creating their own money system, which Maureen and I have talked about. What inspired me the last time, though, is Maureen pulled me aside. She was sitting with elders at the community planning session, and elders are really important in their culture, and they have a special table, and sometimes they grab the mic and say profound, sometimes audacious things. And Maureen says, "I see you use the medicine wheel. I'm not sure you're using it." She wasn't criticizing me, but she says this notion of, I said, the medicine wheel makes sense to me. It's a circle. And she said, I want to share with you my work and how I use the medicine wheel to help people, especially in trauma, especially our youth who are trying to find their way in life. And I can show you examples of how quickly people can change and transcend their traumas within a few months, just by journeying through these 4 directions, which Anika is quite familiar with too, and Anika will explain that maybe later. So I wanted to, invite you, Maureen, to speak about, you're an Indigenous elder. I think you're an elder, at least wisdom and insight, both from the Indigenous, the Cree culture, but also from the Western culture, the Christian, the Judeo-Christian culture, which we've been trying to do in this show is talk about the convergence of the Abrahamic religions, how there's a common thread here. And for me, the joy is the Indigenous wisdom, the knowledge keepers that are hopefully bringing forward in this COVID world some wisdom. So thank you, Maureen, and we welcome your thoughts and reflections on this question that we're asking on the show is, where do we come from in part, but what now? What are the opportunities now from your perspective as an Indigenous person in Canada? Yeah. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mark, and it's good to see you. I'm sure we'll see you soon.
I hope so.
I'm sure, yeah. So I guess basically it's kind of exciting because there's been talk, in Indian country about, this time where, there's going to be this big transformation taking place in the world, and that the people of the world will look to the people of the land for the answers, right? And so that part of it has been exciting because I've seen it. Okay, you have to understand that I back in 1983, I moved away from the res. I was totally indoctrinated, hook, line, and sinker. I was the person. I bought into everything that I was taught, the lies that I was taught about our people. I bought into that, like, you know, jam on peanut butter, let's say. And no, I'm serious. And it was like a really excruciating, although I didn't see the excruciating part until I was able to get away, move back to the res, and begin to be introspective. And you know, because I became a residential school coordinator. So therefore I worked with the residential school survivors, and which my father was a survivor. He's now gone. But during that time, it was like a time of real growth during that time, because I had to let go of a lot of structures that I had built. Well, I love those structures. Those are beautiful structures. You know what I mean? And so, but I had to let those all go and let them die, which was like a whole grieving process in and of itself. But it's been the most liberating thing, to walk into who you were called to be, who you were designed to be, which for me is an Opaskwayak First Nation woman, a Cree woman. And so with this whole pandemic, let's say, I just see people like my nephew Scott is, well, he's married to my niece, and they've been building this house for 5 years. One day he woke up and he said, that's it. He walked away from society. He knows all of the trappings, right, of materialism, of this whole system that is so imprisoning. It imprisons people. And when I left the res, that was the greatest fear my mother had, that I would get lost. I would lose my way. I would lose the foundation of the spirituality that I learned at home, to be human, to be a human being. And so her fears came true. I was totally lost until I came back home, and I began to observe the people and how they responded to situations. And I'm learning to respond to situations in the way that I was taught, but it's taken a while. I've been here for 20 years now. And so what I see the pandemic doing is bringing us to that place that I had to come to, that place of stillness, that place that no one else goes into except us, right? Isn't that beautiful?
It is, but could you just quickly, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
That's okay. That's okay.
For those viewers or listeners who are maybe not familiar with First Nations or Cree, you are coming from, maybe just give us a little insight into how is that different, or what are the foundation you're talking about?
Okay, so the foundation is spiritual. It's like, as a child, you recognize that you are part of this whole, of all of creation, and that there is no hierarchy, that like we are not the most important of all of creation.
Yes.
Isn't that so? Oh my Lord. But nonetheless, we grow, right? And we begin to discover that throughout our journey and throughout our life. And so for me, the pandemic has been, like my husband said, a reset button. We have another opportunity. You know what's been most profound for our people, I believe? That the earth, Mother Earth is resting. Like that is so, when I even say that, it's so emotional.
I must be.
It is so emotional.
Especially
because
for a woman, I think.
yes, Mother Earth, you know, and the earth nurtures us, you know, and allows us to grow. And we've just haven't taken any thought in how we develop, you know, and it's very heartbreaking.
So Maureen, before we started talking, you were reading something to us, the wisdom in the, if we talk about the indigenous economic models that exist and has been sustaining those communities forever. Can you please read that out to us again, or maybe say something about it?
I'll read it out to you because I just wrote way back then. I didn't really put it much thought into it, but it fits perfectly now. Microeconomic structures impose a devastating impact on microeconomics. It's ominous in its shadows, almost invisible in its overshadowing presence. And then ta-da, the devastating results of this being unchecked is a system that is self-imploding, an occurrence that's necessary and unavoidable. Isn't that interesting? And it truly is. Like, how much further can we go, right? It tells of an ecosystem that must self-destruct in an attempt to bring balance. Balance in life, in all circles of life. You'll notice that the wildlife are coming out, right? Is balance in life in all circles of life is mandatory when creating an ecosystem that reflects sustainability and harmony, an undeniable process that must occur.
And you think now is the time it has occurred?
Oh, yes. It's like we have an opportunity as humanity, as human beings, to make a change. But when any change occurs, you know, like even going into this lockdown, right? It's like, I liken it to orienteering to my students. You know, when they're going into a new situation, it takes a while for us to begin to really focus on our environment, focus on the things that are taking place, right? And that usually takes a while, at least a good month. And so then when the dust settles, then we begin to, oh yeah, okay. So now how do we start to rebuild, right? How is this going to look? What are we going to do? There's an opportunity for us to make incredible changes. Like there is no reason why people should have not have clean drinking water. There is no reason why people should be starving. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
And it's like our stewardship of our resources, seen and unseen, right, are in question. And what a great opportunity.
So I mean, we failed as custodians of this planet.
Yes, we have. And, you know, there was a flood. Mark, you'll probably remember this. There was a big flood in Alberta, maybe 10 years ago. I forget how long ago that was.
I think it's only like 5 years ago, but it seems like...
Are you serious?
It's not that long ago. I don't know, maybe it's longer.
Good. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so during that time, during that flood, okay, leading up to that flood, there'd been a lot of talk about the toxins that were going into the water and all this. And then one of the elders, my good friend's mother, had a dream that the water had had enough. That was it. You know? And so we as human beings are so disconnected with all of creation, because we have this notion, this hierarchy notion, that we are the most important thing, the most important in all of creation. You know what I mean? And no, for real, that really is. And so, you know, when I think of toxins going into the water, I just grieve over the fact that the water needs to breathe, or when a machine is digging deep into the earth, like the devastation. I actually have a person in northern Saskatchewan who quit his job as a excavator because he heard the earth screaming.
Wow. Wow.
True story.
Oh, wow.
And so which brings me to the fact that who cares about the money? He was making, you know what I mean? Who cares about the money? And basically that's the bottom line. And so, and that was why my nephew walked away from, you know, from society's norm right now, which is, you know, money, success, what is the definition of success and all this, right? Able to distinguish because of the billionaires or trillionaires or whatever, that we neglect to even see the obvious, which is hoarding is a mental illness.
It is.
You know what I mean? So
yes, thank you for your wisdom. Maybe we can bring John in as well. John Hilbrey is our friend. He's sitting here as
well. In a place called Sazim, I listened to you very carefully, and I understand exactly where you are. This moment, this opportunity, this great opportunity we have for resetting the button, rebirthing, is, I think, very visible now to more and more people daily. This lockdown is giving us a chance to go inward and discover who we really are. And clearly you've done that for a long time. The change that needs to take place, of course, is within ourselves, individually and collectively. Are you hopeful that this transformation, this rebirth that is genuinely taking place in many people, it's very visible in our small community here, and from all the people I think we're all meeting, do you think this is going to happen individually? And if it's only individually, will that be enough? Don't we need to have a almost simultaneous majority transformation to change the balance and to bring balance into harmony? Because this is your cri de coeur, bring things back into balance. We hear this from everybody we speak to, from the Chinese source, from the east to the west, north and the south. They're all saying we've got to bring things back into balance on every single dimension. But one by one, that's not going to be enough. Because I may be able to change, or my neighbor may be able to change this little village for the better. But really the village, which has 1,000 people in it in the winter, it's the 1,000 people together that bring about the change. Do you believe that your community, your collective community, will simultaneously grasp this opportunity, or were they always living in the opportunity? Were they always so spiritual that they recognized that they were only part and parcel of a greater glory called the earth? Are your people there? Are they already ready for this change?
Well, actually, you know, I don't know if you know the history of our people. And
also, I have some intimation
Okay,
about it.
okay. So there's been like an incredible assault against our nations from coast to coast. And when I spoke earlier about a time when I had been so indoctrinated to believe the lies, that really affected the course of my life. And so when I came back to the reserve, I began to discover who I was. And so in the past, I would say there was a great increase in wanting to know about our history in the early 70s that came across our community. But since then, there has been a resurgence of wanting to rediscover who we are as First Nation people. Although there are, of course, those that have kept the ceremonies all these years and didn't go to residential school or were not affected by colonization in a way that they would abandon their ceremonies. So right now, okay, it's interesting that you say individually, because when that happens, you are changing your world in your home, right? And I think to make an incredible, profound change in all of society, of course, seems like an insurmountable task. And so therefore, there's a teaching when people go into their vision quests, or their they go into 4 years of doing their fasting, 4 days for
4 days, thank you.
Yeah, 4 days for 4 consecutive years. And so my nephew that I speak of, Scott, he was telling me that the elder told him, okay, so now you understand that you are responsible for you. So he's showing him this diagram. Bless his soul, he passed away out after Scott's last year, and he was in his 80s, late 80s. He said, first of all, there's you. You're responsible for you, and then your family, and then your community. And then, once all of those things are in place, then you can help, the wider circle. And I thought that was very wise. And back to your question, I think in pockets, there's this great awareness, but it hasn't really affected all of us, but it's definitely a goal. Absolutely. We have made, as Mark will know, we have made incredible strides toward our language, revitalizing our language, because within the language, of course, that's our culture, right?
Sure.
And so they're not just words, they're actual teachings and of our role, whether it's an aunt, uncle, grandmother, grandfather, and the literal translations are there. So I would say that it's in progress. That's what I would say.
I think it's a beautiful answer. The meaning of the language, we've lost the meaning of language. We've abused
Yes.
it and changed the meaning of the language. And it's the original language inherent in each caste, tribe, nation, state, religion, philosophy. It's the original language which contains the original spirit of the being.
Yes.
We think to do anything, we've got to get back to the great significant words that build up the culture of your society, and of certainly Portuguese is a very unique and individual society too. But in the main, certainly in the United Kingdom, from where I come, and the United States, they've lost the meaning of the word. It is
Oh, yes.
abused, misused so profoundly that no one even knows what they're saying, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that the work starts with understanding what we're saying and when we say it. And I love the answer that yes, we're all responsible one at a time. Person, family, community, etc. And perhaps that's the way it will be. So it's not going to be a rapid transition, is it, Maureen? It's going to be a progressive over a long period of time.
Absolutely. And not only that, but can you imagine, so we have this commerce system built in, right? And it's pretty ironclad. And so to actually suggest that, okay, we have to like start from scratch and rebuild, it's like not in their not in their language to understand that, you know. So I believe that you know, the people that Anik and Mark, you've been engaging with, of course there are pockets of people like that, right, all over the world that are long for a change and that are willing to make some sort of contribution toward that end, right? And my husband and I were involved with another couple. We were called Northern Connections. God rest his soul. Our partner passed away a year ago, December, and he was an Air Canada pilot. His name was Joe Mullen. And what we did was we went into different, well, basically, our desire was to help in those very settings, to help in those economies, if nothing, to bring awareness to the potential of individuals. So we went into Rwanda, and we did help a couple of micro, well, they weren't really loans. Well, loans in the sense that, you know, you do well, then you help your neighbor, that kind of loan. And so, you know, we had, that was maybe 2000, it's been so long ago, maybe 2014 or, yeah. So,
Maureen, can I ask you, you know, of course, I've become enamored with First Nations, and from my first work with the Inuit and Nunavut, it changed my life. That was 2006, so it's interesting, your diary was 2005. And,
yeah.
you know, and I'm guilty by association. I'm a macroeconomist, and I think your reflections in your diary are very profound, that we have a system that's, it's like the all-seeing eye on the pyramid, you know, on the $1 bill. That's kind of, you know, shadowy macro system that persists in stifling the individual.
And Mark, can I interject?
Yes.
Just for 1 second.
Please.
Don't ever apologize for your calling.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
thank you.
Because
thank you.
Yes, because really that is exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yes.
And so just
it only took me 60 years without a vision quest to get to this point. So
yes.
What I want to say, we could spend hours talking about your culture, and for the listeners, most people have no idea about Indigenous people. Ganata. What Ganata in the Cree, my friend Lewis Cardinal says, Ganata means sacred place or pure place.
Yeah.
You know, it's not North America,
Holy
it's Turtle
place.
Island, holy place.
Yeah.
The Cree were one of the most elaborate cultures. They moved all through North America.
Yes.
And brought they were a mystery religion, my friend says. Here, even in Edmonton, where the great gathering place was, the Monto. Monto means great spirit. It's in the middle of the word Edmonton. All these things that are just in front of us. And one of the things that has struck me is when I learned that the hierarchy of needs that Maslow defined, when Karen Pheasant who is an Anishinaabe woman from Manitoba Island in Ontario, said to me, I'm doing my PhD on this story of Maslow. I said, what do you mean? He says, he came to Alberta. He was with the Blackfoot. He learned about the hoop, the sacred, they didn't even call it the medicine wheel. And he turned a circle into a pyramid. I said, that singular difference of diagrams makes all the difference in the world. And what you've taught me and what I've learned is that if we think in terms of circular economy, circle, everything, all the answers are in the circle, in the relationships. The circle represents relationships and harmony in the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And the work you're doing to help people work through, and the medicine wheel sort of rotating through time and space, through volition, through free will. And every child born, as the Cree say, is an answer to a prayer. All these beautiful teachings. And I'm like, I'm just gobsmacked. And I now have a sense of hope that we can construct a new economic system based on these ancient teachings and wisdoms, which we as colonizers who brought a flag in our laws, the codified laws, which you never codified, we tried to destroy your spirit. And you're still here to remind us, even in our trauma, even in our sadness, that a new narrative is possible. And that's why I love what Opaskwayak is doing as a distinct nation of 6,500 souls and people who can maybe re-energize Turtle Island again with this wisdom, and maybe our prime minister. And it's unbelievable what's possible right now. And so I'd like you to reflect on this notion of the wheel, the circle, and what that represents as a potential working model, operating model for an economy from macro to micro, or vice versa.
Okay. So basically, the teaching of the wheel and how I see the microeconomy and spelling out to the macro is, first and foremost, we're all equal. So therefore, there shouldn't be anyone really without, right? And so you spoke about the Potlatch the other day, and basically it's that spirit of looking after your brother, of sharing, of caring. And I actually grew up in a home where my mother did that, and so she instilled those values.
Can I just stop you for a minute? There's so many of our listeners who don't even, we said potlatch. That was a West Coast kind of tradition. Can you just quickly describe what was the potlatch and why did we need to destroy or try to destroy it?
Okay, so it's totally contrary to the worldview of economy, right now, the way it is now. But I liked your true meaning of economy that you shared the other day. A potlatch is happened in the West Coast, and the individual that was doing a potlatch brought all of their belongings. And this still happens today, Mark. Houses, cars, everything that is material that you own is given away during that time. Can you imagine? Like, and so that is the potlatch. And so basically it's a reminder that the most important thing is our spirit and our relationship, right? And not to be attached to this world, to the enticement of the world, which, you know, I told you at the beginning, that was my mother's biggest fear, right? And if anyone were to get lost, it would have been me. You know what I was always, I grew up in a really big family, and I'm going to ask my sisters if they actually, because I swear, I heard my mother so many times, you have to get on the right road. You have to find the road. And it's like, what road? You know? So, Mark, I hope I answered your question.
Can you
What
just
was
speak?
your question?
Well, the question is, how does the wheel, the circle, present a new operating model, a potential system of governance as you're attempting, I think, in Opaskwayak?
Okay.
And is it a model for Canada? Is it transferable? Is the question, because of course it's kind of a rhetorical question. I believe it is, but I want to hear from you. You're a counselor on, you're a chief of council. You're making decisions. You're writing a community plan right now. You're in the midst of the guts of governance, of doing budgeting, of all of those things. And how are you getting informed with your traditions of the circle, of the wheel, your own Cree laws that you're renewing or remembering? Okay.
And so basically, during this whole process, this budget process, and the medicine wheel, the circle, you know, so basically everyone brings their ideas, and we actually had a big vote on this back in February 29th. So basically everyone has a contribution to make, right? And so the ideal, and of course, you know that as human beings, we, you know, who can attain the ideal, but, you know, but it's a work in progress, right? Is that everyone's voice or contribution is made, and that we help one another, and that they're, you know, the needs that are there are addressed. Whereas in society, or in the whole system right now, it's like you're on your own, you know, like that. So basically we're more collective in our way of doing things, and although we're also individual, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I just see we have an opportunity at OCN, like you said, to create something that can be used worldwide, that can be used, you know, that can begin to influence other communities. And that is to bring our resources in the middle and just, you know, have everyone, there shouldn't be any lack, there shouldn't be any need, there should be, it should be just a place of well-being, you know. Yeah.
This is a beautiful example of you know, how communities could be self-sufficient. We have that between amongst us. Yes, beautiful. Yeah, very nicely said.
Yeah.
Wow. I think.
Thank you, Maureen. Maureen, can I ask one? I know we sometimes we go on a long time, but I wanted you to just reflect on the work you're doing with individuals, especially youth. And you've told me some amazing stories how through this journeying through this wheel, you've helped a lot of young people get back on the path, or get on a better path, let's say. Can you describe just briefly how that works, and without giving away your trade secrets or your intellectual property?
Okay, so basically everything belongs to the creator, right? So anyway, I'm a life skills coach, and my mission and my desire in these last, let's say, 10 years or so, has been to work with young people and older people to discover, to become self-aware. That self-awareness is created. And so I use the medicine wheel initially to find out where they're at. And so I have a scale right? And they tell me where they're at physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so that just gives me an idea of the areas that I need to work on. And a lot of my classes are stories, because I'll tell you something. This is one of the biggest observations that I've made in the last few years. It's like we encourage people to be individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out there in academia.
Mm-hmm.
But we want them to be individual in the sense, in the way that we are individual. You have to understand this concept the way I understand.
Individuated. Yeah, so we have to be
Yes,
individuated. Yes, okay.
And so, you know, so one of the first things that I teach the students is basically, you are truly individual. You are not going to have the same thought pattern as your you know, as your fellow classmate or whatever, and to bring them to that kind of awareness where they're accepting of one another and accepting of others, because we have so much. I don't think we realize how much judgment we have. And I don't think, yes, for real. And it's like, okay, you don't understand it this way. Well, you're wrong, you know, like that. And it's like, no, that's my contribution. And that's your contribution, you know, to this circle. And it's been just an incredible transformation for some of the students that are ready, because you have to be ready, right? And you know, when the student's ready, the teacher will will appear.
The teacher appears.
The teacher appears, and so there's always that timing, and for those that are not there, it's okay for me too, because before I used to stress out about it. I always thought it was about me, but it wasn't. It's like, no, get over yourself. You know what I mean? It's like,
so true, Maureen. You speak my language. I'm so glad. I'm not the only crazy one here.
my kids totally think I'm crazy, but Mark, and Anik and John, in all seriousness, you know, to witness someone come into themselves and in all reality of who they are, both light and dark. Because so many times we want to hide the dark because it's not something that we're proud of. You know what I mean? And so I tell them, if we were not in this, on this plane, like, that's the only way that we exist, in the balance of light and dark. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? It's only the creator that is non-duality, but we live in duality. And the quicker the people begin to accept themselves and look in the mirror and say, yeah, that's me with all my flaws, you know, and to be able to embrace that part of yourself, it's so liberating. And so over the years, I've witnessed this liberation, and it's been so amazing. And I want to highlight something here also. So I meet up with my students, and they're in different communities. And this one time I met up with this one student, and he was like, you know, feeling good, half snapped, right? And then this individual I was with said, so he said, my student said, oh, I love you, and, you know, I thank you, you know, your course changed my life. And the individual I'm with is like making judgments, right? looking at the person, oh yeah, they made a change, you know, like that, right? And so then my student left, and then I could tell, you know, because it's so prevalent out there, those judgments and those, you know, you have to be so aware of those little inflections of judgments. And so I realized that he was grappling with all this, and I said, you know what you see in your eyes, you could be judging this person because they're, you know, they change, but they're half snapped. But you're measuring from your perspective, and you don't know the story behind the survival of what this person experienced.
True.
Like,
True.
you know, he could be dead
Yeah.
now, but he's not.
I think
You
it's
know?
the loss of empathy as well. We've lost that empathy towards each other. You know, before judging someone, we need to understand there could be a story behind it. You know, there's pain there hiding behind.
Yeah, I like this quote, and I'm really bad with quotes. So please don't quote me on this.
Work on this quote.
We won't judge you. We won't judge you, Maureen.
No, the quote goes something like this. And I know if I tell my friend, they'll say, no, that's not how it goes. But anyway, but the idea is there. The quote is, when I understand my own humanity, then I can extend kindness.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Beautiful.
This is a good note to end our conversation with. Thank you so much, Maureen. The wisdom coming from you, I think we all needed that, and the world needs that wisdom as well, which is already here. It is within all of us.
Oh, yes, it is.
We just have to look inside and dig deep.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Maureen. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
We're so blessed to have you, and we're going to have more Indigenous women speaking.
Wonderful.
So thank you for sharing your wisdom. You're welcome.